All right, thank you for your time. Look, I'm here today to pitch an intellectual venture that I believe addresses one of the longest-running, most significant gaps in the entire global marketplace of ideas.
For centuries, one major player has absolutely dominated the philosophy space. But in doing so, it has left a massive, underserved market completely untapped. We are talking about the intellectual, the existential needs of millions upon millions of people across the globe. So, let's just dive right into the problem, what we see as a catastrophic market failure. The dominant player, Western academic philosophy, literally built its brand on big ideas, right? Freedom, justice, human well-being. But there was a massive blind spot.
And this, right here, gets to the heart of it. We're talking about the centuries of colonization, of enslavement, and the very discipline that prided itself on freedom and justice offered almost total silence. This wasn't just a missed opportunity. Frankly, it was a massive ethical and intellectual failure.
Whoa, hold on, let me get this straight. You're telling me that the market leader in thinking about humanity essentially decided that the lived experiences of entire continents of people were philosophically irrelevant? That's not a blind spot. That sounds like a business model built on exclusion.
Exactly. And that is precisely the opportunity. So let's talk about the solution. Our venture, Africana Philosophy, is designed specifically to service this immense, neglected market. We're not trying to compete with the old player on their terms. We are creating a new category altogether. Now, this is crucial. This isn't one single product. It's not a rigid dogma. You should think of it more like an operating system. It's a meta-philosophical concept. Basically, it's a way to organize and bring some oversight to the incredibly diverse and critical thinking that's been happening for centuries among peoples of African descent, both on the continent and, across the diaspora.
And this really gets to the core of the venture's driver. This wasn't born in a quiet university hall out of some leisurely speculation. It was forged in the fire of daily existence. I mean, when your very humanity is being questioned, you are compelled to ask the most fundamental questions about life, freedom, and justice. This is philosophy as a tool for survival.
Okay, you've got my attention. I'm intrigued. But now it's time for some serious due diligence because a venture this ambitious, well, it's gonna have some major operational hurdles. My biggest concern right now is your branding. Africa. You're talking about thousands of cultures, hundreds of years, the entire continent, the diaspora. Any investor sees that and just sees massive logistical risk. How can one single term possibly contain that much diversity without just collapsing under its own weight? That is an excellent question. And we have a very clear operational framework to manage exactly that complexity. So, first, we recognize the commonalities are contingent. They're born from shared but not identical histories of struggle, not some mystical racial essence. Second, diversity is a core feature, not a bug. The differences are just as important as the similarities. Third, this isn't prescriptive. It doesn't tell anyone what to think. And finally, it's an open platform. Competency is the only barrier to entry, not ethnicity. Okay, that clarifies a lot. So what you're really saying is, you haven't built a single one-size-fits-all product. You've built a platform that enables, organizes, and validates a whole ecosystem of related but distinct intellectual ventures. Now that is a much stronger value proposition.
Exactly. It's a platform. And like any good platform, it supports a rich, diverse portfolio. So let's take a look at the two main product lines we can identify right off the bat.
So on one side, you've got continental African philosophy. This bucket includes everything from the incredible intellectual traditions of ancient civilizations like Kemet, to post-colonial debates on nation-building, to the wisdom of traditional sages. And then on the other side, you've got African diaspora philosophy. This is thought that was forged in the Americas and the Caribbean, grappling with enslavement, systemic oppression, and what W.E.B. Du Bois so brilliantly called double consciousness. And we can just drill down into any of these. I mean, take African American philosophy as a case study. You can see a clear product of illusion. It starts with the early, powerful philosophies of abolition, moves through the intense strategic debates after Reconstruction between giants like Washington and Du Bois, then to the cultural explosion of the Harlem Renaissance, and right into the modern movements for liberation that finally brought these ideas into the academy. It's an incredibly rich and dynamic history.
So let's talk about the bottom line. What's the return on this investment? Well, it isn't about quarterly earnings.
The value proposition here is something much, much more fundamental. Let's just quantify that market gap again, okay? But let's look at just one country in 1 year. In 1850, there were over 3.6 million people of African descent in the US. Their existential questions, their struggles for meaning, their theories of justice, all of it was just deemed unworthy of philosophical consideration by the dominant player. That is the sheer scale of the intellectual capital that was left on the table. And this isn't just some historical artifact. Let's look at a modern, high-stakes application. After the fall of apartheid, South Africa needed a new way to think about justice. Pure retribution would have torn the country to shreds. They needed a totally different philosophical framework to move forward. And this is where the practical value just becomes undeniable. They drew on the concept of Ubuntu, a philosophy centered on the simple, powerful idea that our humanity is intertwined. I am because we are. It says that justice has to be restorative, not just about punishment. This wasn't some abstract academic debate. It was a philosophical concept that provided the actual moral architecture for healing an entire nation. So the ROI becomes crystal clear. We enrich our collective understanding of core human concepts like justice and freedom. We add new, vital perspectives to the great storehouse of civilization. We gain intellectual tools to address ongoing global struggles. And maybe just as importantly, we learn powerful lessons in how not to rationalize abuse and hypocrisy. So when it comes down to it, the real question isn't whether we can afford to invest in this venture. It's whether, in a world still grappling with these exact same issues, we can possibly afford not to. Thank you.